Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Happy New Year. I'm Lainie Sevante Wulkan. And I was just saying offline that in the 6 years that I have been doing Zeta Global Radio, I have never done live like this. We've done a few little behind the scenes shots, but for the most part, Zeta Global Radio, at one time we were in 60 countries, has always been a radio show, recorded at a recording studio. We progressed into what is now what is called podcasts. And I think this year with COVID and being more online, I think most of us became more into doing Zoom and doing StreamYards and doing these. So this is the natural progression and it's perfect. And I've had a little bit of a hiatus from the Zeta Global Radio platform and decided that when I came back to doing interviews, because I took a year off, wrote another book, got busy with other projects, doing a weekly show regarding my food healing oracle deck, I said to myself, when I do Zeta Global Radio, I'm going to do it with very impactful stories. Not that I believe every story we've done in 6 years has been impactful, but I really wanted to focus on extremely compelling, at this point in life, events, people, stories that are making incredibly big differences in the world. And that's why we're here tonight. So this is going to be an incredibly heartfelt hour. And it's a real honor to be here and to introduce you to Debra Rosenman, who will be coming on in just a second. But I just want to say, I knew Debra Rosenman years ago, and she had told me at one point she's working on a book about chimpanzees. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. Didn't really catch on to the extent of what this was all about. And I said, oh, well, one day, when you get your book done, you can come on my show and we'll talk about it. And years later, we are here. This moment, the book is done. She's won 11 awards worldwide and counting. It's the most prolific book. I have chills up and down. I have a box of Kleenex next to me. It has been an absolute honor to read this book and to be here today. So we are going to just get right into this show. We're so glad you're here wherever you are. Welcome to our new Facebook Live, or if you're watching us on Zeta Continuum on our YouTube channel. We are here with Debra Rosenman. Give her a warm welcome wherever you are. Say hello. Yay.
Hi.
Debra.
Hi, Lainie.
What's the weather in Santa Fe, by the way, if I should mention where you are? You live in one of my favorite places.
This is where I met you, actually.
I know.
I live here, or in Albuquerque. The weather is really cold, but it's been very, very dry this winter. So we're sort of in a drought, hardly any snow.
Wow. It was a long time ago you mentioned to me that you were writing this book, and I had, for some reason, it didn't sink in. I just like, oh, that's a wonderful topic. And it wasn't until I reconnected with you and you sent me that book, I think I'm forever changed. I mean, I am forever changed. I'm trying to hold back my tears.
Oh, don't hold back. Actually, the tears are really healing. So, and it will help others open up their hearts and let their tears flow. I could start crying myself as well. I tell you that I worked on the book for 13 years. Even my close friends, didn't quite know what I was really doing. And I remember a very close friend of mine, Lynn, was here with me after I had the book laid out and I was showing it to her. And she just broke out into tears because she had no idea.
No idea.
So, yeah, I mean, 13 years is a long time to be working on a book.
To be doing anything, honestly, but to be working with something that holds such um, importance and such honesty and such realism, and to feel like you're helpless and hopeless, but then you're inspired. I mean, you the stories and the heroes in this book have run the gamut through me. I mean, what I've experienced personally reading it over these months, because it took me some time, is like I'm right there with you and every chimpanzee who's still here and have passed. And so for you to tell me you did this for 13 years, how did you even begin this? Like, where does it, let's start there, and let's bring people up to speed about how did you enter this world?
I entered this world literally like being born and loving, while I was growing up, loving primates. I mean, I was just drawn to monkeys and great apes. So when, my parents would take me, my sister and I, to the Bronx Zoo or any zoo, they could just leave me in the primate house and I could just be with them for hours. So that never left me. And many, many, many years later, I got very ill. It's a long story, but I was poisoned by pesticides. That was the final straw for my immune system. And my immune system collapsed, and I got something called multiple chemical sensitivity or environmental illness. And back then, people thought you were nuts, when you're it's a little, the story is a little bit different now, but so I spent many, many years in isolation because I couldn't, my immune system collapsed and I became allergic to everything out in the world, even like electric heat. I couldn't hear, and of course, hair products and perfumes. And
so you had already started on the book while this was going on, or this is what led you to it?
This is what led me to it.
Okay.
And after a while, I started to have dreams, and chimps would come to me in my dreams. So that was a huge piece of it. But I want to go back a little further. I owned an event planning business in New York City. This is before I got sick, for 10 years. And I was living in New York for like 20 years. When I owned this, I for a friend's birthday, I actually hired a baby chimp. So there, I'm going to say it. This is the second time that I've ever told my story. So I hired a baby chimp, and I had no idea that I was part of a problem. It was horrible. Little Casey came in. She was 2 years old on roller skates, and everybody was oohing and aahing, and her guardian was very, very careful with her, and only let her, quote unquote, work for an hour. She was jumping, she was, tumbling, she was adorable. So years later, when I started having dreams, lots of different kinds of dreams, but chimps came to me in so many dreams and were showing me, giving me messages. And it was a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
Of course, I jotted down my dreams, and one time, so then I actually went and started doing research, and I was still sick, and I was living in El Dorado, outside of Santa Fe, and I started doing research. With everything I could get my hands on, I was reading, and
in New Mexico, no less.
Now, yeah. I'm
saying that, but people haven't read your book yet about why I say that, because we're talking, that's a jump ahead to, research facilities in New Mexico. Right. But here you are in New Mexico.
That's right. And so all these dreams and all these chimps coming in the dreams. And then after one of the dreams, I realized, oh my God, I forgot about Casey. That's the little chimp that I hired years ago. I kept pictures of her in a cardboard box in my closet with a couple of other, a couple of other hundred pictures that meant something to me. And I ran and I got the picture of Casey, which I still have. They're right over there, actually. And I broke out in tears. And I said to Casey, to the picture, I am so sorry.
Wow.
I had no idea when I hired you that I was part of the problem. I promise you, I'm now going to be part of the solution. It's bringing tears to my eyes. And I've never wavered. I have never wavered in my promise. I started writing articles about chimps, about the chimps that saved the chimps. They're in Florida now, but they were in New Mexico. And then I got the idea in 2007 for the book. And I think that's when I got my first story. Debbie Cox, who is in the book, just a marvelous, amazing woman. She sent me the first story. And
Can I mention something about Debbie? Because I know normally I never write down questions. I don't know if you know that. You're the first person I've ever done this for. I've normally just talk and, we have this conversation, which we are, but there were so many points of your book that I wanted to write down. And Debbie Cox in her story was one of them.
Yeah.
Ooh. Can I just mention her real quick?
Yeah,
Can we segue to her?
Yes.
Well, a big part of the book talks about mothers and mothering. And as a mom, I took that to heart the most. And we're keeping this positive because this isn't for everyone to be gloom and doom. This book was incredibly insightful and changing for me on so many positive ways. But what I gathered and garnered most from Debbie was talking about how the chimp and the mother and the babies and that bond is so inextricably linked and so tight, just like mamas, like I'm a mama, watching over my cubs, that I just couldn't help but wonder, how could people not know that when she saw such compassion? I don't want to talk about what happens to the mothers and that's just, I can't go there, but people could read the book if they want to understand that piece about what happens, where chimps come from and why the mothers aren't with them. But the thought about the behaviors of the mothers, is that the same in captivity or in sanctuaries as it would be in the wild, that unbelievable closeness?
So life for a chimp in the wild is extremely different than a chimp in captivity. And however, the bond that a mother could have with a baby in captivity can be the same. And in the wild, chimp mommies carry their babies with them. They didn't even let them down for a couple of years. I mean, the babies are just glued to them.
Yeah.
So that kind of touch, that kind of socialization is incredibly important for both the mother and the baby. So, you've read the stories where, in captivity, often in biomedical research, that didn't happen. Often babies were taken away from their moms, and the mothering is incredible. I think Debbie really talks about doing the chimp moms really work in positive ways, positive reinforcement for the kids. Like they're not yelling at them, once the babies are starting to walk and explore. So yeah, it's
well, you brought
really
it's
hard.
interesting.
it was really hard. And Nancy Megna's story as well about the babies is,
That's actually where I was going to go next. So I'm going to jump around on these questions, but they're all going to get answered. For those who are watching this, we touched on already, or if you're just tuning in, and we have a lot to cover in the next 45 minutes or so, because I have a lot, I could go on, but we want to get the most information for you. But for those of you who don't know what Debra was saying, do you want me to call you Deb or Debra to the audience?
Debra.
Yeah. Debra, is that what looks really sweet and cute, the conditions are not that for the entertainment industry. And she touches a lot about that. And if you want to know more and learn, but there were lots of things. In fact, interestingly today, very ironic, in fact, you did a whole little one of the stories about the entertainment industry and the story out on Moore Park College. I actually know a professor at that school. And so I was like, wow, another piece that I can totally relate to. And I'm sorry if I mentioned that, but some of these stories are very old. In fact, it's not like they just happened last year, right? You're spanning several years. Lots of changes have been made in lots of places.
Yeah.
All right.
There was something, chimps were listed as a threatened species after the U.S. Endangered Species Act of 1973 became law. And they needed to be called an endangered species. Anyway, I talk about that in the afterword of my book. But the classification was changed finally in September 14th, 2015. So there's no more research done on chimps. But still, there's loopholes, and the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, right now has 34 or 36 chimpanzees at Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, and they're not releasing them. There's a sanctuary that would take them, and it was absolute BS. That they're saying we can't let them go. They wouldn't survive the trip. They're too sick. It's all BS. It's all about money, because Holloman gets money. I don't know how much, but they get money for each chimp. So it's not about the welfare. So yes, so many great changes have happened.
Great changes. But at one point, the entertainment industry weren't taking care so much of them. And you mentioned, by the way, I don't know if you know, I worked for Michael Jackson for several years. I've been to the Neverland Ranch. I've seen the zoo. He had bubbles. I don't know if you knew that. We'll have a whole conversation about that offline, I think. What I wanted to mention, and you mentioned it earlier, you called them babies. And I call them babies. I call my four-legged dog babies, my cat babies. They're my babies. What if they have fur? And by the way, I learned in your book that chimpanzees have hair, not fur. Okay, I learned that. But one of the striking points about so many of these affluent people and not so great people who decide to keep them as pets, that they are they treating them as a member, like a child, or were they treating them as pet animals? Because they're our species, they're our brothers and sisters who are incredibly intelligent. So were they raising them as kids, or were they raising them as animals? Because I know that was just so compelling.
Such a great question, because people don't really think about that. When chimps are babies and really young, you can handle them.
Yeah.
But when they get to be 6, 7 years old, they are so strong. They're stronger than the strongest human man. They're, just playing, they could rip off your arm. So, if they're raised as kids, And you read lots of stories, and a few in my book too, that, people would take the chimps down to Dairy Queen and, dress them up. And when they turn,
eat with a fork and a spoon in a bowl like kids.
But when they turn 6 or 7, all of a sudden they have to be put in jail. They have to be put behind bars. They have to be put in a room where they can't escape. So they don't know what's going on. What did they do wrong? The only thing, it's the humans, but they're literally in jail. So all the stimulation that they've had, all the choices they may have had,
gone
in the wild for sure. But even, being raised as a kid, as a pet, they lose all that. And then a lot of people just keep them there because what do? Unless they send them to sanctuary. So the problem is, if they're there for a very, very, very long time and there are no other chimps and they get to sanctuary, they don't know they're a chimp.
They think they're humans.
That's right.
Unbelievable.
That's right.
You think you're doing something great, and then they don't know how to assimilate with their own kind.
Very sad. It's very sad what we have done to thousands and thousands and thousands of chimps, and the suffering, the torture that they have been through.
Mm-hmm. Well, in your book, you do, and not that you were dramatic, you were literal and visceral and surreal. And in that same energy thread, you had people, these heroes, these doctors, these technicians, these helpers, these in these research facilities and these sanctuaries, just by all means doing whatever they can, in their courage, in their hope, in their even for me, where they were just energetically holding the space, even though they knew they couldn't do anything. And it was touched on so many stories that here these people they're of service to these chimpanzees. This is their life works. And yet they still were the jailer at night, even when they knew that they were the animals, the chimpanzees were wanting to, be free, that they couldn't do that. I mean, the choices, your heroes, and if they're watching tonight, God bless you, every single one of you, for the stories you shared so candidly, had to make a lot of real choices. And I can only imagine how that impacted their lives in so many ways, because I read your book and my life's impacted.
Yeah. And I wanted the book to be about the chimp's journey, but also the caregiver's journey. So, I mean, the caregivers, are lawyers, primatologists, keepers. It runs the gamut, but they're all caring for the chimps, and their journeys and their awakenings are pretty amazing. And they all are heroes. So I absolutely, I agree with you. And
I think it might have been Debbie, or maybe it was Nancy Magno, was just saying that observing the chimps with the mothers with the chimps, that it gave her a new perspective on how she should raise her own children. She learned from them how to mother her own children. Oh my God.
I can't remember who I
don't remember who said it, but I just remember I was so touched by that.
I think it was Nancy. Yes. Yeah. I mean, she was taking care of babies. Her story is just incredible. She was taking care of babies. She was volunteering before she then got a job there. And, I mean, these babies had nowhere to go and were just stuck in cages. I mean, it was just absolutely horrific. So what Nancy did and what everybody else has done with these chimps is, in my book, is pretty heroic.
I actually wrote a little section for you about Nancy, because what I learned from Nancy is what Nancy learned from the chimps, is her ability to forgive. And the quote that I took away from the book was from Nancy Megna. Is that how I say her name, Megna?
Yeah.
It's amazing how forgiving most chimps are after humans have inflicted pain, isolation, and disease on them. In removing them from their mother, siblings, and friends, taking away fresh air, sunshine, and their freedom, humans have robbed them of everything vital for social, emotional, and mental stability, and yet they forgive. Like when I think about that, I cried for days. When I look at something that's been small to me, it isn't small anymore. I have a huge capacity to forgive, but when I think about that quote, forgiveness is a whole nother level. And I've had shows on forgiveness. Forgiveness are the keys to the kingdom, but the chimps still forgave. Wow.
Most, not all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. There had to have been some real.
There are a few that don't, and I think they're not in the book. Well, Augusta is in the book, where she, and that story is in the beginning of the book. Augusta is in Africa, and she just didn't forgive. She had such a horrific beginning. But most do, and it is really incredible. It is incredible that they, because what is forgiving? The chimps actually are opening their heart and loving.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what forgiving is, right? It's just, and loving. So, yeah, I can see how that paragraph could really move you. I'm planning in the new year to actually do a Zoom Facebook Live with Nancy.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
And I'm going to be doing Facebook Lives with all the contributors in the new year.
Great.
They'll all talk about their stories. But with Nancy, I'm going to do 2 of them. And one's going to be with Anya Gilmartin in the UK. When she read Nancy's story, she was, she's got 2 gorgeous kids, and she was so incredibly moved. So it's going to be a conversation between the 2 of them, and then
Right.
I'll be there too.
Well, keep me posted. I have another quote. There were just so many. I could have gone for days on this. I thought, wow, this could be a 3-hour interview, but I know we only have an hour. One of the other, interestingly, you had documentary filmmaker, highly acclaimed documentary filmmaker. She's done so many, National Geographic, Emmy Award. I mean, she's just such an award winner. Allison Argo, who has been on Zeta Global Radio before. And I think I remember she was talking about, she was one of the first to find the chimpanzee that was inside of a mall in a pet store, something crazy like that. But anyways, I remember the story. We interviewed about some of, we were actually talking about elephants. In any case, to see her in your book, great, amazing. And her quote, I was touched by. I believe that we cannot learn to respect members of our own species if we're unable to respect others in the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's really, it's profound. And when I think about that, I think about kids and how important it is for them to be around animals, non-human animals, when they're little, because they really learn, respect. And I know I've read many, many reports over the years about men in prison who actually used to beat their animals and were really mean to and horrible and torture animals. And then it just went to, the humans. So there's something really profound in that we really do need to respect animals, all non-human animals.
Well, on the flip side, they have many now prisons have the animal therapy programs, and that they're seeing just incredible responses to having that, being assigned a dog and having to take care of it. Back in seventh grade, back in the day of busing and things being crazy in my world, I I had the good fortune of going to a private school, and I was assigned a horse at the beginning of the year. And I had to take care of the horse. I had to clean the stall. I had to do its hooves. I had to do everything. And then at PE, I got to ride it in the mountains where I went to this really wonderful school. And again, that had everlasting impact on the value of just taking care of another soul, whether it be just through the eyes of communication in that heart space. So, I mean, I've been an animal lover my whole life. But that, what Allison said was so important. In fact, that's in the headlines right now is Shia LaBeouf or Shia, I don't know how to pronounce his name, that, you know, he's blacklisted from Hollywood because he was shooting dogs at random. So I think that seeing this has to give people pause. The whole book will give people enormous pause and reflect. But for her to see that, I think that was an astounding quote. So we can move on. I just wondered anything you wanted to add to that.
I know that she also it's about fostering respect that she talks about as well, and really honoring the diversity of all creatures. And we're taught that very, very early on. So, we're really taught about empathy and compassion. So it's really, I've worked with kids for on and off for years around finding compassion and empathy for animals, doing all kinds of activities with them. And I've worked with my sister, who's a teacher, a fifth grade teacher, Sandra Lenore, and I've worked with another fifth grade in her class. They're in Rhode Island. And I've worked with those kids, talking about compassion. They were reading Ivan about the gorilla, and I think that's the gorilla.
I think that's, as soon as you said, I'm like, oh, that's the one.
Yeah. And I think they made it into a movie. I haven't seen it.
She did the movie, I thought. Oh, yeah. I know there was a big feature in Hollywood, but I think she did a documentary that won some awards on it.
Documentary, yeah. No, it was a Hollywood thing with, I can't remember the guy's name now, but so I love Allison. She's absolutely amazing. She's been doing animal documentaries for a long time. So when she said yes, to writing a story, I was like, yes.
We had done a story. I was, a very passionate and compassionate, will always be with elephants as well. In fact, my husband and I went on our honeymoon to Thailand, and we were in Bangkok, and all the main agenda, sure, the food and the temples, no question. But we flew an hour and a half north of Bangkok, 45-minute drive in the middle of nowhere, and we went to the first woman's own female hospital for elephants. Anyway, so I did a show here on Zeta Global Radio all about sanctuaries, and I didn't do chimpanzees at the time. I think there was a horse sanctuary, an elephant sanctuary, but I chose sanctuaries from all over the world that were saving animals. So maybe a future show we will be touching more on this, and I can kind of co-help support you in any way.
That would be great. And Cher just, was it in Thailand? She went and freed one of the loneliest elephants in the world. There are many.
Many. Oh yeah, they step on landmines. It's another whole story there. You talked about, well, actually, Dr. John Debenham in the Goma 5. I thought that was one of the most touchings too. What did I write to you? I got a true sense of the connection. He said that chimpanzees are intelligent, conscious beings. Okay. Take that in right there. We're all intelligent, conscious beings, but he's talking about our brethren, our brothers and sisters. He says they are intelligent, conscious beings who feel emotions as intensely as we do. They are capable of complex problem solving and abstract thinking, and are able to remember large amounts of information while they interact in the world. He questions this. what I think anyone who he questions what I think anyone who reads these stories, how can we treat individuals such as us with such double standards? Again, right? Double standards all the way. If they are conscious, how do you treat your fellow soul brothers and sisters if they're conscious and you're conscious?
Well, there's the problem. Therein lies the problem. Yes, we can say that someone's conscious because they're alive, they're not dead, but there's a level of consciousness, a level of awakenedness, a level of really heart-centeredness, a level of, one doing one's own work to realize that humans are not the end all and the be all. Yeah. And people, so many thoughts going through my head. So chimps, when we share 98.6% identical DNA. Now, of course, the difference is a lot, but 98.6 is a tremendous amount. So, of course, and chimps are extremely emotional. So they love, they fight, they grieve, they feel sad, they laugh.
They read magazines and wear high-heeled shoes.
And that's it's very sad in a way because they're living in our world. They're captured in our world, even in sanctuary. And people who, run the sanctuaries, God bless them all, they're doing an amazing job. I'm talking about the bona fide, the good, real sanctuaries. And yes, you have to give chimps enrichment.
Enrichment, yeah.
Because their minds are incredible and they need to be stimulated and find things of interest. So, yeah, a lot of chimps are fascinated with shoes. And I think it's in Eileen's story where, the chimp, I can't remember which chimp it is now, maybe Martina or Noelle, or one of the chimps would put on, they found high heels in a really big size. And, the chimp would put on high heels and then walk around. But one of the chimps also took a baby, a stuffed animal, little chimp stuffed animal, and would put it in the fold under their belly and carry it around. And chimps actually do that. So they lead, highly emotional lives. So, yeah. And they do. I've shown pictures of a few chimps looking at the Chimpanzee Chronicles, looking at my book, upside down or right side, up, whatever. But they're still, and Diana Goodrich, in her story, she talks about, they do everything they can. Her sanctuary is Chimpanzee Sanctuary Northwest outside of Seattle.
Uh-huh.
Everything in their power to take care of these chimps and keep them healthy and keep their minds active and make sure they're, safe and socializing. But she said something like, she's still at night, she has the key. They're locked in and she can go home. Yeah. And Adriana Martin also talks about that, and that I know ripped her apart, that, she goes home at night and the chimps can't go anywhere. She wakes up in the morning, and the chimps are still, drinking their same smoothies or whatever they're having for breakfast in the same location, and she's traveling.
Yeah. Like, she went away for a year. One of them went away to grad school, lived in multiple states and countries. Her whole life progressed, married, divorced, and there they were. Same thing.
And that's what we've done to them. That's what we have done. This is human beings have done this because they're not awake. And they have to, it's like the researchers doing such horrible things, it's like you have to be cut off from your emotions, the humans, in order to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Completely cut off. So
we are here to wake as many people up. That's what we do on ZGR. This is what you're doing, however I can support. We're here to wake people up. They need to read your book. They need to understand where we are in life, what they can do. Because when you say 98.6 to our DNA, and that is an absolute cruelty to have that double standard when those beings are feeling what we feel, and and grieve. Oh, the grieving process. No, I've been through lots of grief, and like all those areas of death, and how they grieve and mourn. I mean, it's just, you need to do something. People need to do something. And
I remember Jane Goodall telling a story about one of the young chimps in Africa, and was very, very attached to her mother, and the mother died, and the baby was so distraught that she just went and laid down, and she died of heartbreak.
Oh, wow.
Chimps grieve, and that's covered in the book as well in a few stories.
Yeah. Yes. So on a positive note,
Yes.
well, we're gonna I just want to move it into Washoe and talk about sign language and talk about ASL. And I took some sign language for a couple years. I was called to be able to do tarot readings and oracle readings for the deaf. So I took a keen interest. It was very hard for me on top of everything else I had going. But I've always followed, my generation, Washoe. I mean, there's certain ones, maybe like Ivan too, but there are certain stories that even if you're not in that world. But I just want to talk about because that whole development, like you got stories from the people who were right there at the birth of this and studying under the people who really brought this to, global recognition. So can we talk a little bit about sign language and chimpanzees for a minute?
Sure. I don't think that to my knowledge, that these kinds of projects are going on anymore.
Oh, that's
and I think it was Mark Bodemer's story, and he was a really good friend of mine, and he passed away in November.
Right.
One of the chimps that he worked with, when he worked with Roger Fouts,
yes,
did all the original stuff, and Roger Fouts worked with the Gardeners and
in Washington. Yes.
Yeah. And in Oklahoma first, and then Washington. He said that this chimp, I think it was maybe Bowie, who then ended up in medical research at the worst lab the worst two labs were like Lemzip and Colston. And
New York and New Mexico.
He was signing the chimp, and nobody, said, oh, let's get somebody who maybe knows sign language and see what the chimp's saying. And then when I think there's the story with Roger Fouts where he went in, the chimp had been separated from him for 10 or 15 years, and he didn't know whether the chimp would recognize him. And Roger went in, and it was on one of the shows. I don't think it was 60 Minutes, but one of those type shows. And the chimp knew Roger, and did the sign and wanted out. And then
oh, look, you have Adriana. She said Bowie at Lemsit. Look at this. You have the people who know your work and know these stories. I love it.
Oh, I can't see that, but yes. Thank you, Adriana. I love it.
Here. I'll put it now. Can you see it?
Yeah. It was Bowie at Lemsit, yes.
All right. Awesome. Yay, Adriana.
She's a sweetheart and a good friend also. And then Mark Bodemer went in, and his story is called Key Out, because one of the chimps said to him, signed key out, let me out.
Chills.
And then if you ever, Next of Kin by Roger Fouts is a book that changed my life. And really, it's an incredible book. And it will give you the history of sign language. And he talks about how they put signs, they make up signs, they make up words. Now this is an American, this is an English, right? It's American Sign Language.
American Sign Language, right.
Right, and so chimps learn how to speak, and not only speak, but make up their own words for how they perceive things. Is that right, Adriana?
She said, by the way, the show was 2020. Thank you. This is wonderful. And by the way, I just want to let you know, because you didn't see this, Deborah, Sandy Lenore says last year students are still talking about your visit to the virtual classroom. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Okay, so here's another topic near and dear to my heart. It's funny, I guess, well, everything's near and dear to my heart, but the sign language is music. So can we talk about music and chimpanzees? Because it was great. And I love the evolution, by the way, of your book. It started off like, oh my God, I don't know if I could get through this. And then it was like, no, I need to get through this. I need to understand what the blank was going on. And then I just kept going and going. But what I wanted to say is that as the book, moved on, and then you kind of, talked about music, I was like, I love the levity, because we always want to kind of leave on this note of like promise and hope. And I think music does that for everybody, and it's our universal connector. So what did I write? What a happy, enlightening story to learn about his involvement musically. So his name is Harry Hamura? Mura. Okay. And so do you want to give, I obviously wrote a few things about him, but the one quote I have, and if you want to touch on it, he said, the universal language of music had brought us together to share an unforgettable moment between species. Well, here. So let's tell people a little bit about his impact and what he did with music. Of course, we own a record label and production recording studio. Everything here is about music. So I just was like, bring it on.
I'll have to introduce you to Harry.
I would love it.
Actually, he's a musician, and he plays guitar, and he lives outside of Chicago, or in a Chicago suburb. And I mean, he's really like in the music scene, and
okay.
his life was completely changed by watching a PBS documentary about chimps. And, he then called the sanctuary, and then one thing led to the next. And, he's playing music for chimps in the sanctuaries. And it's an inspiring story. And it took him years, but he made an album. I can't remember when it was released, maybe 3 years ago, called I Am. And this CD, I mean, he worked on this for so many years, collecting great ape vocalizations and sound recordings.
Yeah, sand samples. Yeah.
In wild habitats, and also in sanctuaries around the world. So the album starts with the chimps in the wild, and what the music and the sounds would be like there. And then it just sort of evolves to chimps behind bars, chimps in prison, in captivity. So it's a powerful CD. The music is beautiful, and I highly recommend getting a copy of that.
And he raised money, and that's what the sanctuaries need. They need money.
I think he's donated 100% to the sanctuaries. So I mean, he's in it. He used to have a business called Musicians for Apes. So, and then it evolved. So he's been doing this for many, many years, and it was such a gift to work with him on his story. And yeah, I mean, isn't it true? Music really is a universal language for
No question. For everybody, for anything, for anyone.
and I mean, this is not about chimps right now, but even patients with Alzheimer's, and my mom has Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
If they can't remember their own children and they can't remember anything, they don't know anything about themselves. I mean, they've lost all of that connection to self, capital S, self.
Yes.
They love music and can remember the lyrics, excuse me, to a Frank Sinatra song, or some piece of music that they loved, or they sit down at a piano and they remember how to play. So music really
No question.
goes so deep into our soul. So
well, when we had our studio in Albuquerque, Howard worked with young teenagers who were dealing with schizophrenia, autism, all sorts of different, afflictions and challenges and, differences. And when he got in the studio with them, it was like completely mind-blowing how he was able to just get them to create and focus, and no matter what was going on. So huge on that. And it's and it kind of leads me to he's probably, I don't know if he's watching this interview, but he was laughing because I said I was reading the book, and one of the sanctuaries is an hour and a half from where I live. And I'm like, oh, well, this one's only an hour and a half away from here. And he's like, oh, no, I can only imagine where you're going to go in there. I'm like, well, Debra and I will be talking something with music, something with like I was already thinking like, I'm going to help her in any way I can. We've talked offline, but, I think we're at that point where we need everyone to do some help. Now that you're telling me that people are still, where the Holloman, that people still are imprisoning, enslaving these beautiful beings. So what can we do to support you? What can we do? I want people to buy the book. And by the way, the book you said is on your website and it has a fundraiser. So let's just talk about how we could support you, the book, the Chimps, and just keep this movement going and get this book out to everyone we know.
The book is available on Amazon and my website, but I just got word that Amazon, I got word the other day that there were like 5 copies left. So
that's a good thing, right? That means people are buying the book.
So I highly recommend going to my website, which is DebraRosenman.com. DebraRosenman.
I just put it in the chat.
Okay. And and then you just go to the book page and order that. And this whole year, since June till the end of the year, which is in another 2 days, I'm giving 10% of book sales to a sanctuary in Liberia, a chimpanzee rescue and protection. And her story, Jenny Desmond's story, is in the book. And they are taking in, they started with like 2 chimps. When we did the story together a couple of years ago, she had 20 chimps, and now she's got like 64 chimps. And they're babies. They're all babies. So, from the bushmeat trade. So they're moving, hopefully, into their new sanctuary, but they still need money to build the second level of sanctuary. And, it costs money So I'm trying to help them. And if you buy the book off my website, then they get a little bit more money. Actually, they get a lot more money. 10% is a lot more. Not that much from Amazon.
You glossed across it, but it bears repeating. Not that we need to get into the whole conversation at the end of the conversation, but for those of you who completely have no idea, when she said bushmeat, it means that there are cultures that are still killing chimpanzees and consuming them, correct? And some believe it's a spiritual power.
That's not the problem. I mean, that is a problem, but many people in Africa are using chimps not for sustenance for themselves. They're selling the bushmeat, and the bushmeat ends up in London, in New York. There's a black market for that. So they're doing it to make money, and then they sell the babies. So in Liberia, Jenny and her husband Jimmy are doing a lot of conservation work as well, and they're from Boston and Colorado.
Wow.
And they're an amazing couple, and it's just the work never ends. I mean, I really thought when I began the book that by the time I finished the book, I was a little worried because it took me a long time, 13 years. And I'm like, oh, is it still going to be relevant? And it's more as relevant today as the day I started the book in 2007. So, and I want to go back to something that you said, and I want to thank you because it was intentional. Many people, editors, other people that, read the book, they're like, you cannot start with stories like that. You have to you have to bury that in the middle. And I'm like, I knew from the very beginning exactly how the stories were going to be laid out, and do the hard stuff pretty much in the beginning, a little in the middle, and then just have it be lighter and lighter, until we get to the end, and it's Harry, a little kid, because I always wanted to end on a note of hope.
It's brilliant. That's why you've won 11 awards and counting. It's exquisitely painful, exquisitely inspiring. I mean, I just my hat's off to you, Debra. I'm so proud and so blown away. Really. It takes a lot for me to, to really just be I am pretty emotional and excited, and, but you pulled out all the stops on this one, and for such good reason. Oh my God. And it was like, I opened that up and I was like, here we go. And I had to read every page. I mean, there are some times, I have stacks of books that I prep for interviews, but I had to read every page, every word, highlight everything. It was like profound.
Oh my God. I thank you so much, really, because I understand how difficult it is, especially for those of us that are extremely sensitive.
Empathic. Yeah. It's hard. Yeah.
Ooh. It's not an easy read, and that you did read it is just, it's such a blessing. Thank you. And this is it. I want people to cry. I want people to laugh. I want people to really be so touched by the lives of these chimps. Somebody gave me a review for the book and said, I think it was Michael Tobias. He said, if the chimps could write their own book, this might be it. And yeah.
Aww. All right. Well, before we complete this momentary time together, because there's more to be continued, does anybody have any direct questions they would like to address for Debra that she may be able to answer? We want to just make sure that we've accounted for you, because in the past we would be able to put a Zeta Global Radio interview on, and then it's out there, but we would never be able to get to interact. So this is quite nice, is that you get direct connection with our guests. So if you have a question, let us know. Otherwise, you can reach Debra at her website, Debra Rosenman, and help support this journey with this book and everything that is going on to support these 98.6. Will you remember that? I won't forget that. How can we not, right? It's our temperature. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Joanna Salerno, she says, so fast to hear. Let me show you what she says, Deborah. So fascinating. I can't wait to read the book.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
And if you have any questions or comments, Joanna, get in touch with me as you're reading the book.
Love you, Deborah. Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks everybody for being here. And I suspect we may touch in with Deborah from time to time, and I would love to just help people know more of what you're doing, Deborah, with these interviews. And that's all I have to say. I'm just so pleased. And thank you again for wherever you are in the world. Please pass this on. And if you like the work that we're doing, support Zeta Global Radio. We are going to bring compelling interviews like this that make a difference in the world from time to time. If you want to support us, the information's there as well. Our support that we receive will go on to help support the people we are here interviewing. So that's all I have for now. Deborah, any last words you want to just let everybody know about?
I just want to say I love you, Lainie, and I love the work that you're doing in the world. And, between the healing food decks and your beautiful book about Finn, your children's book.
Yeah, Finn's Giant Leap. Oh, it's great to hear his name again. It's been a while.
Finn is a frog. So I love your relationship with animals. And I love that you read the book and had me on. So, and we're going to talk.
Yeah, we will. All right, everyone. Blessings. Happy New Year. This was just perfect to end this year, move into the next year, and let's all do it in ways that are more conscious and awake and working together in oneness. Thank you. Take care.